For years, adapting Dune beyond its first novel was considered nearly impossible. Frank Herbert's universe grows stranger, darker, and more philosophical with each book, veering away from traditional blockbuster storytelling. Yet against all expectations, Denis Villeneuve not only succeeded in adapting Dune, he turned it into one of the most respected modern sci-fi franchises in cinema. Now with Dune Part 3 officially in development, a single revelation has radically altered expectations for what this film will be. Paul Atreides will be portrayed as 15 to 20 years older than we last saw him. That one detail changes everything. It strongly suggests that this film will not be a straightforward adaptation of Dune Messiah, but something far more ambitious. A story that blends multiple novels, multiple timelines, and multiple futures into a single cinematic experience. A time jump that breaks the mold. In the original novels, Dune Messiah takes place roughly 12 years after the events of Dune, while Children of Dune unfolds closer to 20 years after the first book. By aging Paul into this in-between period, Villeneuve appears to be positioning Dune 3 at a narrative crossroads. One foot in Messiah, the other stepping firmly into Children of Dune. This choice matters because Dune Messiah is not a conventional sequel. It is introspective, tragic, and deliberately anti-heroic. The book dismantles the myth of Paul Muad'Dib, exposing the horrifying cost of the jihad carried out in his name. On its own, it's a challenging novel to adapt as a single blockbuster film. By stretching the timeline forward, Villeneuve gains narrative flexibility. Instead of ending the trilogy on quiet despair, he can show consequences unfolding across years, political, spiritual, and deeply personal consequences that ripple outward through Paul's family and the Imperium itself. Paul Atreides, worn down by destiny. When audiences last saw Paul Atreides, he stood at the height of his power, victorious, worshipped, and terrifyingly certain of his path. But the Paul of Dune Messiah is not a conqueror in triumph. He is a man trapped by prophecy, haunted by visions he cannot escape. An older Paul reflects a ruler who has endured years of religious war, moral compromise, and the unbearable weight of prescience. His choices no longer feel heroic. They feel inevitable. This is the Paul who understands that even his attempts to do less harm still result in unimaginable suffering. He rules not because he wants to, but because every alternative vision he sees ends even worse. Aging Paul visually and emotionally reinforces the tragedy at the heart of Herbert's story. Absolute foresight does not grant freedom. It removes it. Why the twins change everything. One of the most revealing details surrounding Dune 3 is the confirmed casting of Paul and Chani's children, Leto II and Ghanima. In Dune Messiah, these twins are only born at the very end of the story. In Children of Dune, they become the central figures. Their inclusion alone signals that the film cannot stop at Messiah's final pages. Leto II, in particular, is one of the most consequential characters in all of science fiction. His existence reshapes humanity's future on a scale far beyond Paul's reign. Introducing him, even briefly, plants the seeds for stories that extend centuries into the future. This suggests that Dune 3 may function as both a conclusion and a prologue, ending Paul's arc while quietly launching the next phase of the saga. Multiple timelines, one film. Structurally, this opens the door to a bold storytelling approach. Rather than unfolding linearly, the film could weave together multiple timelines, past, present, and future, mirroring the fragmented way Paul himself experiences time. Scenes from the Fremen Jihad could be intercut with moments from Paul's rule as emperor, while glimpses of the twins' future hint at the destiny he cannot prevent. This method would allow the audience to feel the same temporal dislocation Paul lives with daily. It would also align perfectly with the themes of Dune, inevitability, sacrifice, and the illusion of control. Chani, loss, and the end of Paul's humanity. At the emotional center of Dune Messiah lies Paul's bond with Chani, the one relationship untouched by prophecy, politics, or religious manipulation. To the Imperium, Paul Muad'Dib is a god emperor, a messianic figure whose name fuels holy war across the galaxy. To Chani, he is still a man, fallible, fearful, and painfully aware of the future pressing down on him. Her death is not merely a personal tragedy, it is the final fracture in Paul's already eroding humanity. For years, Paul has endured rule as a kind of living prison, forced to choose between futures where all outcomes are catastrophic in different ways. Chani's loss strips away the last reason he has to endure that burden. What remains is not defeat on the battlefield, but spiritual exhaustion. Crucially, Chani's death coincides with the birth of the twins, an act that seals Paul's fate rather than redeems it. In fulfilling prophecy completely, he also fulfills its cost. Blinded by a stone burner and no longer willing to exploit prescience to cling to power, Paul submits to the ancient Fremen law: a blind man must walk into the desert alone. It is not suicide nor exile, but acceptance, an acknowledgement that his role in shaping the future must end. Ending the trilogy here would be devastating in the most Dune-appropriate way. Paul does not fall as a tyrant nor ascend as a martyr. He simply leaves, having learned too late that even the best intentions, when backed by absolute power, can destroy everything they touch. His disappearance marks the end of the myth and the beginning of something far stranger. The first steps toward the God Emperor. Perhaps the most profound implication of Dune 3 is the on-screen introduction of Leto II. Even in childhood, Leto II represents a future that dwarfs Paul's legacy. He is not simply Paul's heir, he is the solution to a problem Paul could only glimpse but never solve. Leto II is born already burdened with ancestral memory and prescient awareness, inheriting not only Paul's knowledge, but the full weight of human history. Where Paul resisted becoming a monster to save humanity, Leto II will embrace that role completely. His destiny is not to rule for decades, but for thousands of years, to sacrifice his body, identity, and individuality in order to enforce peace through stagnation. A full cinematic adaptation of God Emperor of Dune would be deeply unconventional, quiet, philosophical, and unsettling rather than action-driven. But Dune 3 does not need to tell that story outright. It only needs to confirm that this future exists, that humanity's survival demands something even more terrifying than Paul Muad'Dib. A brief glimpse of Leto II, framed not as a savior, but as an inevitability, would radically recontextualize the entire trilogy. Paul's sacrifice would no longer be the end of the story, but the necessary precondition for a far more extreme solution. Given how often the Dune films have defied skepticism, it would be a mistake to assume this door will remain closed forever. Villeneuve's proven respect for the source. What makes this ambition believable is Villeneuve himself. His adaptations have consistently prioritized tone, theme, and restraint over spectacle for its own sake. He understands that Dune is not about battles, it's about consequences. By resisting the urge to simplify Herbert's ideas, Villeneuve has earned the trust of longtime readers while introducing new audiences to one of sci-fi's most complex universes. His films do not explain everything. They invite viewers to think, question, and rewatch. That same philosophy will be essential if Dune 3 attempts to balance political intrigue, spiritual collapse, generational legacy, and existential dread within a single film. Where the story might end. If Dune 3 truly serves as the conclusion to Villeneuve's trilogy, the most likely endpoint is Paul's disappearance into the desert. His story ends not with victory or redemption, but with acceptance. The final moments could shift forward in time, showing the twins as children under the watchful, increasingly unstable gaze of Alia, hinting at conflicts yet to come. The audience would leave knowing that Paul's sacrifice was only the beginning. It would be an ending that feels complete, yet unresolved by design. a trilogy that redefined sci-fi. If Villeneuve succeeds, his Dune trilogy will stand as one of the most thoughtful science fiction adaptations ever made. Not because it simplifies Herbert's work, but because it trusts audiences to engage with it fully. Dune 3 is shaping up to be more than a sequel. It is a reckoning, a meditation on power, prophecy, and the unbearable cost of saving humanity from itself. And if history has taught us anything, it's this. When people doubt Dune, Dune proves them wrong. If Dune 3 truly ends Paul Atreides' story, it won't be with victory, but with consequence. And if the future of the God Emperor is already taking shape, this may only be the beginning. If you enjoyed this breakdown, like and subscribe for more videos.